welcome you to today's webcast on aphasia. Before we get to the webcast presentation, I want to mention that these webcasts are part of a larger joint initiative by the Government of Alberta called the Community and Social Services Learning Series. For more information about these series, check your emails for regular updates or go to csslearningseries.ca. You will be able to pose your questions to us directly via our live chat window. If you have yet to access the chat, I recommend you try it out now. Scroll down from your viewing window to find it. We will address as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Paige Boudreau is our online moderator. She will pose your web chat questions to us at the question and answer period. Today's session is also being recorded, and the video will be posted on the csslearningseries.ca website in about 2 weeks. So our presentation today is I have words but no voice. Are you listening? I'd like to take a few minutes to just give a brief introduction about the wide variety of communication problems that can be seen after an acquired brain injury. This won't be an in-depth look into communication disorders, simply a primer to get everyone thinking about the topic and the complexity of the issue before I hand the presentation over to our speaker, Daralynn. The most common way a brain injury can affect communication function is through language impairment, speech disorders, or cognitive communication difficulties. We know that language skills and cognition are interdependent, and someone will usually experience interference with more than just their language, speech, or cognition alone. Within language impairment, we see two main forms of aphasia, expressive and receptive. Expressive aphasia is an impairment in the ability to use or express language. So at its most severe, a person would not be able to produce any meaningful speech or write letters or words. Receptive aphasia is an impairment in the understanding of language. So at its most severe, a person will not be able to recognize spoken or written language. It is possible for someone to have purely expressive or receptive aphasia. However, it's most common for somebody to have a combination of the two. I've listed here a few varieties or possible combinations of the specific deficits that many people experience, but I won't go into any definitions of these. There are two main types of speech impairments. Dysarthria occurs when there is damage to the parts of the nervous system involved in the control of the muscles used for speech. If it were to occur in isolation, a person's ability to speak would be impaired, but their ability to understand language and construct sentences would be intact. Dyspraxia is a disorder of planned and coordinated movement. So it occurs because injury to the areas of the brain responsible for conscious movement are affected. Dyspraxia of speech causes people to have difficulty saying what they are consciously thinking. However, some people may be able to speak perfectly normal when not thinking about it. Cognitive communication difficulties affect speech because they can contribute to a range of communication difficulties related to memory problems, taking things literally, problem solving, cognitive fatigue, slowed speech, and information processing. So if somebody has any memory problems, it may be hard for them to access information that they know, and this can affect how they communicate with others. Sometimes people have difficulty taking things literally after a brain injury, so they may have reduced ability to grasp humor or sarcasm and may miss the subtle nuances in conversation. If somebody has issues with problem solving, it can result in the person being unable to use language to think through and resolve an issue. And this can cause them to make poor judgments, decisions. Impaired reasoning and problem solving skills can also lead to people experiencing difficulties in their conversation style. Cognitive fatigue can lead to more extreme issues with this. So if somebody gets tired, then it usually affects their aphasia more prominently. Slowed speech of information processing is a common consequence after brain injury as well, and it may mean that a person cannot keep up with a rapidly flowing conversation. I'm going to ask Paige, our moderator, to let us know who the audience is.
Hi there, Tracy. So today it looks like we have a mix of people that have suffered a brain injury, as well as people from organizations like the Brain Care Center and that sort of thing. So we do have a mix today, which is great. Welcome, everyone.
Okay, perfect. So like I said, this was just a brief overview of some of the communication problems that we see after acquired brain injury. We can provide some websites after the presentation if you're interested. Now I will pass the presentation on to Daralynn, who will talk about her personal experiences with this.
Thank you, Tracy. Morning or afternoon, I guess. Thanks for joining in with the webcast today. I usually do this in front of large crowds, but so this is new for me, so it may take me a minute just to get going. A little bit about me before I talk a lot about spike communication. I got my education in early childhood, and after that I worked with adults with disabilities, and then I became an AMT. And after that I worked at the Glenrose Hospital in education. So I was actually in the school education portion of the Glenrose. I did many things before though. Hobbies include horseback riding, hockey, a lot of things before my injury. Pardon? Sorry, I do have Alex beside me here, and she helps if I get mixed up, or she will talk to me if I lose some words along the way. So
What did you do at Glenrose?
at the Glenrose, I worked about 8 years in Pete's brain injury and about 8 years in severe speech and language classroom, grade 1. So on February 11th, 2013, I went to work like any other normal day at work, and was out with the kids at recess and took a foul on the ice at work, which changed pretty well everything about me. This affected many things, so I'm just going to go through a lot of the diagnoses I've had from that foul. One of them, Tracy mentioned a little bit, was fluent receptive and expressive aphasia. Fluent is more than 4 words in a row. Thankfully, I kept my fluent part, and I was a talker before, so it helps a lot. Receptive is comprehending. There's times when I not understand what people are saying to me. I'm pretty good at hiding it, which helps in the world. Expressive is the production of language, so you can tell that my language is a bit different. So what was affected was language, comprehension, memory, and my attention. These all have improved over the last 4 years. I also had issues during the fall with hearing loss, tinnitus, and hyperacusia. I had severe hearing loss. Tinnitus, if anyone not know, is just a constant ringing in the ears. And hyperacusia is increased sensitivity to sound. So I not like loud rooms or loud noises. I don't think I'd go to a concert again unless I had headphones on. I also have dysphagia, which is a swallowing disorder. I'm on sickened foods for life. Apraxia, which has to do with my speech. It's a motor disorder of speech. It has a lot to do with my values. Visual agnosia. My brain not to understand simple line drawing. So the picture you'll see on the slide, as much as Alex will tell me what the picture is, I actually still not understand what that picture is. Oh. Yeah. I also have left field neglect, so I not see much on my left side. So my peripheral vision is impaired since the fall. So generally when I do these talks, there's a group of people and I will ask where in the world they may think I'm from. And I get many places that people think, and it's changed and developed since my fall from the beginning to now. At the beginning of my fall or after my fall, a lot of people thought I had a Texas drawl. Newfoundland, I'd get lightly, it's been sitting at Ireland. Ireland, I did a talk a few months ago. I got to Ireland of Man, South Africa, so many different ones. The interesting thing about this and the reason why I put this in the presentation is that most people just assume when they see me that I have an accent. I not have an accent. What's interesting about it is it's actually your brain's filling in my language. So your brain is trying to figure out where that fits in the world, and that's why people always tend to pick different places in the world. So it's not an accent, but so what I like to do is before I keep going, just so everyone believes that it's not an accent, I have a little clip on what I sounded like before February 11th. I did a lot of volunteering with a nonprofit group, so I was involved in public relations and fundraising. So I did some radio spots and TV. So this is just a very short part of an interview I did with Sienna Collins. So might as well take it away.
All right, it's Feel Good Friday, and if you've got a dirty dog in your life, now's the time to book him or her a wash and help out a great cause at the same time.
Daralynn Swensrude is with the Animal Cancer Therapy Subsidization Society, and their 9th annual Spring Dog Wash is coming up on May 10th. Now, Daralynn, tell us about your group first of all.
We're a nonprofit society that basically subsidizes pets that have been diagnosed with cancer when their owners are unable to do that. So if someone comes in and unfortunately their pet's been diagnosed with cancer and the bill is quite large, a lot of people, their only choice they have is to put the animal down. They can come to us, apply for subsidy, and away they go, and hopefully it gives their pets much more time and them much more time with them.
Hi there. Okay, so that is an interview I did again with a nonprofit, and what I sounded like before my fall. Most people like to see that, and they're quite, if they not known me before, they're quite, I don't know what the word is, I guess, shocked that that was me and how I sound now, and it's not actually an accent. So, yeah, for that nonprofit, I volunteered for 7 years. It was kind of my second full-time job, and I fundraised about almost $500,000 for that wine. So generally I have an audience, and I know there's people out there, but I usually ask how many words does a typical person speak per minute? And if there's any guesses, the actual answer is 150 to 180 words per minute. So after my fall, I was speaking about 28 words a minute, which not sound bad, but when you actually hear it, it's quite profound, I guess, in how slow it is and painful. I tend to have a lot of people finish my sentences in the beginning and until I was able to get some speed back in my language. So this is a little clip on what I sounded like after my fall. This was when I was being first in speech therapy, and what my speech therapist was just trying to get one word out of me. It's a short video. You can kind of tell in it that I get quite frustrated trying to get that word out. So you can listen to that.
The word now.
In it.
Okay,
In
the
it,
word
in it,
is
in it,
im,
in it,
por,
in it,
por,
in it,
tent.
in it,
I know you want to say in it, but it's
In
not
it.
right. Okay, say por.
in it.
Okay. Tent. Say tent. You know, like a tent for camping.
Yeah.
Say tent.
Tent.
Portent.
In it's important.
Oh, you just said it.
In it's important.
Important.
Yeah, in it's important.
Closer.
In it's
Import.
important.
Important.
In it important.
Okay.
In it's important.
Okay, so that was a little bit of my, after the fall, obviously my speech has improved quite a bit. One thing I normally have, we do an activity and we don't have the chance here, but it's a Dr. Seuss activity where we ask the group to speak out 28 words a minute. And it's interesting the feedback you get from it because everyone is egging each other on to want to say more than one word. It works out to about a word every 3 seconds. So if you get a chance to do that, it's an interesting activity. I want to talk about some of the experiences I had early on and some recent way. Interesting things after my fall. I lost my number, so that's something that really stuck out was the fact that I couldn't count anymore. So numbers to me meant nothing. Some interesting stories was my OT early on in my recovery had me bring in a bank statement. It was maybe about 4 months after my fall or 3 months. And she had asked me where $900 had gone from my ATM. They were just $20 withdrawals. And I told her I had bought some gum. And it took a while to figure out, but I'd not understood numbers, so I was taking out cash. And I'd go buy a pack of gum, and they would try to give me my change back, and I wouldn't take it. So they'd get a really good tip, I guess, on that. So it was quite an expensive lesson in money. The other thing is I have a lot of troubles with double meaning words, and I still do to this day. I think it is better than it was. I went to a speech group. It's just a funny little story. I went to a speech group, and afterwards, I had my own speech therapy, and I was in the group. They were talking about going to the deli, and I didn't know they were talking about buying meat, but they were talking about how to order things in grams. And for me, that's a double meaning word, and not that I've ever ordered this in grams, but I went back to my speech therapist, and I was quite upset, and I said, I don't like to gripe because they're teaching us how to order crack cocaine. Like, I really not knew that grams, but so she thankfully was able to say, no, there's another meaning for grams. So it was another way that I sort of wouldn't say I'd not understood to the group. I just took it away, and it really stuck with me of why we were going to this deli to order marijuana or cocaine. I had a lot of trouble with word finding in the beginning as well. And one of the things was orange, which is on here, to me was the word help. So I used the word orange a lot when I would ask for help. So if I would say, I need help, I would say I need orange. And I can say to this day that those words mean the same to me. So to me, help is still orange, but I know it's not, I guess, accepted in language. So I've been able to replace it with help. In the video you watched, I think I kept saying the word nanite, and that word was important. So it took a long time for me to get the word important out versus nanite. Some funny stories recently, and these are more recent. I was in Safeway and I was trying to order a sandwich at the Safeway deli, and I wanted chicken. And the lady behind, she had an accent, and it kind of goes back to that communication when we talked, and Tracy mentioned, is not just talking about aphasia, but it could be accents, it could be ESL, it could be hearing impairment, that when you not have that ability to speak, sometimes you have to find other ways. And she had a very thick accent, and so I was having trouble understanding her, and she could not get that I was asking for chicken. She kept saying peppers, pickles, and eventually I'm standing in Safeway and I charade chicken, so I'm in there barking and flapping my arms, and but we were able to communicate, and I guess that's what the best part of that was. Something even more recent was, more recent was medication. I was supposed to take, I was told to take 2 in the morning, and I was getting up at 2 in the morning, like 2 a.m. to take it, instead of taking it 2 in the a.m. So that's another thing with language, and that maybe double meaning words. We have a little quick aphasia simulation, and we kind of put this together, Alex and I. It's Alex speaking on it, of what I may hear in a conversation when it has to do with background noise. With my hearing aids, I hear everything behind me, so if somebody's phone's ringing, not only am I trying to talk to the person I'm speaking with, I'm picking up everything else. I'm also not comprehending a lot of the language that she's saying to me. So in this simulation, just have you listen to it and see what you take from the paragraph.
The party continued for 3 days, but not repeated until 1623, when the Pillsburys suffered another drought. The Pilgrims learned to grow nearest whips, such be corn, beans, and pumpkins. Many still served it. Give thanks, please.
So that's a little bit of what it may, it's not always like that, but a lot of time I'm not picking up a lot of the information. So the top one is what I hear Alex saying. When she say 4-3 days, afterwards, I thought she said 4-3, like as in the numbers 43, and she was actually saying in 4 3 days. This is what she actually said, and on the top is actually what I understood. So I'm not always getting all the information. It's always bits and pieces of the information, and then I have to go back and I have to figure out what the group is talking about, which can be difficult. We don't have it hard. We do something else when I do these presentations called a voice scrambler, and normally I hide it, but we have a video of what a voice scrambler is, and it's something you can look up on the web and try and download. And you'll listen to this fellow. He's going to try to read a very simple 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish with this voice scrambler on. So you wanted to just take a quick listen to that.
A speech jammer is a device that records your voice and plays it back at a slight delay, thus confusing your brain and ultimately rendering you completely incomprehensible. 1 fish, 2 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. Black fish, blue fish, old fish, new fishes. This one has a little star. This one has a little car. Say, what a lot of fish are there.
Hi, so yeah, so that is just showing you what a voice scrambler is. It's a really good activity to do if you work with someone that has any kind of language impairments. It's a lot of people that do it in the groups we go to have a lot of difficulty with it. And what's interesting is their reactions we always see is that they get embarrassed. There's a lot of laughing in the groups, and it is quite funny to try and listen to, but for myself, that's something I live with daily. Something interesting, and this is a very known thing, is aphasia is communication and language disorder, and it not affect your intelligence. We play that with that guy because he has normal intelligence, and when he puts the headphones on, his language becomes impaired. So it's a really important message. It's very important to know when you're dealing with someone with language impairment, how hard that person is working. For myself, listening to a group of people or individually, is I have to take the information and I'm trying to process it, and I'm not always catching it all. And that could be my comprehending, and it could also be my hearing. I do lip read, so if people are not facing me, I may not hear them. This slide just kind of shows that it's exhausting. I know one thing important is I can do yard work for 8 hours and not be tired, but I spend 1 hour doing speech and I want to sleep for 5. So it's a very exhausting thing, anyone with any kind of language impairments. This slide is important. Probably the worst thing for me is silence. And so when I speak to people and they not understand what I'm saying, and healthcare professionals or friends or family, and I just get that blank stare back. And that blank stare is, it's hard to tag sometimes because I have a lot of non-variables, and I think a lot of people have to take their other senses, and mine would be body language. So when you get silence back, it can be deafening for sure. So when I started doing this, the idea was to advocate for those that have no language and people with impaired language. And through the time of this injury, I've had a lot of not great experiences, and I've had some experiences that are good, and I wanted to share some of those. One thing I always ask is, what environment should I feel the safest and most understood when it comes to language and healthcare? I'll go through these, usually we ask, but number one would be a hospital. You would think is the safest place for me. I guess when I was diagnosed with aphasia, I assumed everyone in the healthcare field knew what aphasia was. And that is super wrong. I can tell by people when I ask if you know what aphasia is, even a nurse or a doctor, and I get, yeah, I can tell they have no clue. That's not everyone, but another place, primary care network. I've had really great experiences with them. They seem to have more time than a hospital or an emergency room to take time to. Dyna Life, Insight, the dentist, my home was home care. It should be a very safe environment, but a lot of people come out and they not understand my language, or that I'm not understanding, so they'll just leave information that I can't write or understand and just assume. Emergency medical staff, so EMTs, that kind of thing. I've had paramedics talk right in front of me, not understanding that I can read lips or that I do understand some things, so they just assume when I'm ill, my language is quite impaired to what it is now. So I can revert back to, the 28 words a minute, so they just assume that my language is not good. Frontline staff, I think in my experiences, I've had some of the greatest experiences just with receptionists, people, and I think they have less of a caseload, but they all take the time, and some won't. I've had some not great experience with frontline staff, but it is places I go in. If I'm going for blood work, I should be comfortable and not have to worry about my language. I just want to talk about some of my experiences and what has happened to me. And maybe it hasn't happened to everyone, but again, these are my experiences in places that are supposed to be there to help me. Allergies, for instance, I've had a lot of experience where I have allergies, and I will try to say no, or I'll ask what they're giving me, and they'll tell me, and I'll say no, and they say I'm refusing medication, but it's actually an allergy. I wear a medical alert that has my allergies. In a hospital, you have the yellow bind. It's on my chart, but nobody seems to see it. I've had some of the greatest experiences with cleaning staff, and I know I wanted to make sure I put some positive experiences in. And cleaning staff, I spent a lot of time in hospital, and the cleaning staff you get to know daily. I think, again, they have more time to just try to understand you or listen to you. A lot of them have thick accents, so it's, it's a lot of nonverbal talk when it comes to that. I do lip write. I had a pretty horrible experience. Sometimes it's a blessing to be able to lip read, and sometimes it's not. But I had some nursing staff. I was in a hospital, and they not know that I could lip read, and they were standing at the door. And one nurse asked the other how her day was going to be, and she said, "It's going to be great. I have 3 patients, and one's an idiot." And they were talking about me. So I made sure, and not in a mean way, later that day I wrote a really nice note to her that said, "I hope you have a great day because you have an idiot." I think it's important that they're aware that I'm not challenged, I just have a language impairment. I rely on my iPad a lot when I'm not well. I have a program that has a word prediction. A lot of times that iPad is taken, again, it's they just think it's like your phone. So a lot of medical staff will take it and put it away. It's something that I need. So when they take my iPad, it's like they're taking my voice away. I did play hockey for many years before my fall, and then I was coaching my hockey team. And one of the neurologists found out I was coaching and actually asked my if I hand notes to players as they go by. So they took that experience that me getting out there and getting back involved with my time and put it in a real negative spin just because of my language. It not to make me any less intelligent. In fact, my hockey team won last year with me behind the bench. There. I was in a hospital. It's another experience. 4 days. I was 3 days in a merge. Go up into a room. Doctor comes in, asks my sister-in-law that's there. Doesn't ask me. Waits till somebody's there, and asks why I speak the way I speak. And she was quite upset and said, she has aphasia. It should be in the chart. So those things are things that shouldn't happen. They should know by day 4 that this is the issue. Also because of my language and my visual failed. I've been in a merge and they thought I'm having a stroke because of my language. So instead of looking at my medical history or asking me or getting my iPad, I have a stroke team coming in and the whole place is going nuts thinking I'm having a stroke. Call bows, not great for people that have language issues. Call bows, generally the staff come on behind you and they ask. I can't speak back to them, or if I can, they not understand, so they'll just cancel the call bow. So it's something that needs to be worked on for sure. Recently, or just last year, I was in hospital. I had a night nurse, and I was having issues overusing my call bow, and she was really good because she problem solved, which I think is important when it comes to language. And because I was close to the nursing unit, she problem solved for me and was able to figure out a way to get to me and make sure that I'm answered, just like everyone else with language. One of the biggest things is working with anyone with language issues is not to ignore them. I do have people that go with me to support me. And what I find is I'm not spoken to, they're spoken to. And I still have the ability for language, I just have someone there to help me out with it. So I do, and I think anyone with language, even if it's ESL, you still should address them first. I have Alex here, and she goes to a lot of appointments with me. And Alex can tell you a little bit about an appointment we went to where I was not really spoke to.
Yeah, so my name's Alex. I go to a lot of Darylynn's appointments with her. I completed my science degree in neurolinguistics. I have a younger brother who also has communication difficulties. So growing up, I know how hard that was. So I always thought I was really sensitive and aware of communication difficulties and language impairment. But it really wasn't until I started working with Daralynn that I was able to see how that breakdown really occurs and how heartbreaking it can be. One appointment I think Daralynn's referring to is I think she was getting an x-ray, and I was only in the back of the room just to help if there was some translation. But Daralynn had asked the lady how much longer the appointment was going to be. And the lady, instead of responding to Daralynn, she said, she turned to me when I was in the back it was dark. She turned to me and she said, I think what she's trying to say is how much longer the appointment's going to be. Can you tell her how the appointment will be 5 more minutes? And at that point, I mean, that completely dehumanizes Daralynn. She understood her question. There was no reason to have to look at me and answer that. So I just told her, you can look at Daralynn and ask her that question. And that's not the first time we've gone to appointments where Daralynn will go with her iPad and the receptionist won't even look up to give her that chance to communicate in that way. Just knowing different strategies and working along, finding different ways to communicate makes all the difference. We were in one hospital setting, I think I walked away, and one of the nurses was trying to take Daralynn's blood, and another time it was x-rays. So Daralynn has left side neglect, and it's all written in some aphasia cards. She has it all written in her room. But when I walked away, they were on her left side trying to give her instructions. They were getting frustrated. And I came in and just handed Daralynn her iPad. And by the end of the appointment, everyone was laughing. They changed the total interaction that they had with Daralynn. So I think just finding those strategies really help with those appointments.
For sure.
And I'll give that back to Daralynn.
Perfect. Yeah, Alex helps a lot. So it's my speech therapies and people that go to appointments. Sometimes it's important to have that person there with me, but it's also important that I am addressed. Anyone with language, even if grandma's there and English is their second language and their daughter's there that speaks the language, if it's grandma's appointment, it's grandma's information. And if she wants to talk through the interpreter, she can. I get a lot of Alex being my attendant, and it's not the case. She's just there to support me if there is a communication breakdown. But, it's been over 4 years since my fall, so put a lot in place so I can communicate on my own. So those things are super important. The reason I kind of bring up some of the experiences that are not always on the positive side is that before my fall, I was super outgoing and a real social person at work and stuff. And, when you lose language or your ability to communicate, you get a lot of things from it. And for my anxiety, I never knew before, has become a real issue with me. Going out in public, talking with people I not know is a struggle for me because of the fear of that silence or being judged, or people think I'm challenged. They'll start talking baby talk to me. I had a doctor ask me to show him my tummy instead of my stomach, So it doesn't make me less intelligent to have a communication issue. It just it's like somebody having their mouth wired shut. They can still communicate. You're not going to treat them any different. So I have gone through a lot of isolating myself. I do that a lot to myself. I do have a great people around me, but it is sometimes a hard thing to go out. So that's something to be aware of. I wanted to advocate to try to stop the communication breakdown and help people, if it's the public or if it's healthcare professionals, how to deal with people with communication difficulties and to ask why they went into the field that they go into. One interesting thing, and Alex and I talk about it a lot, is that, due to some of the experiences I've had, I do tend to not go get the help I need if it's an emergency, because I do have a lot of medical issues, till it's right at the last possible minute, because We kind of say it's like having food poisoning. If you eat something that makes you sick, you never want to eat it again. Well, if you have a terrible experience, it's like if you go to a bad restaurant and the service is bad, do you go back to the restaurant? No, most people don't. For me, I have to keep going back to those, and so do people, anyone with communication problems, have to go to these. Alex asked me one time, was my asthma when I would need an ambulance? And you know, it's a joke, but it's not a joke to say not to call till I'm blue. So I know better nights, but it's kind of where I push it. Yeah. So strategies, Master Pi has done a lot for me when it comes to helping with strategies and making the world easier for me to navigate and for them to navigate with me. So just going to give some ideas of some of these strategies early on for me. I got an iPad with an app called WordQI, and it's a word prediction app, and it was my best friend for years. And I will still use it where I'll pull it out and I'll type. It can speak for me. I never liked that, so I would just generally show people it. It's something I use in healthcare a lot. Charades, we talked a bit about the chicken charades. It's a really easy one. If somebody not understand, I'm asking for a pen, I can use, you know, the charade language for pen and get that. Pen and paper, probably the cheapest and easiest way for communicating is if the person's able to write, is just to use a pen and paper. Alarm reminders are important for me, iPad and phone alarm. And I also have med reminders, so I have a company that calls me 3 times a day to remind me to take my meds and some other things, so that's another strategy. My backpack is a strategy. It's kind of a lifeline for me. It has all my medical information, it has medications, it has emergency information, stuff like that. I have Aphasia information and medical cards, and we will show those coming out right now. So this is an Aphasia card my SLP put together, and it's generally, it's everywhere with me. It's in my backpack, it's in my iPad. I pull it out at medical appointments. It takes about 25 seconds to write. A lot of times people seem to have the time to write this, and when they do get a chance, it helps a lot with my language because then they understand exactly what are going on. Again, it takes about 25 seconds. In this slide I talk about a bit, is that 25 seconds that if you can read something that somebody's put in place, if it's a speech therapist or not, is worth 25,000 to me. It's worth everything if you understand that I'm not challenged and I'm just having issues with my speech. When I worked at the Gunrose, I was, again, a bit of a social butterfly, and I would bug people about going on their break because I think it's important for that social time. And people used to say to me they not had 10 minutes. And I would always say to them, you know, because the Glen was across from the AWIC, if somebody left $10,000 in the basement of the AWIC and said you had 10 minutes, you would find 10 minutes. So I think it's important for any professional or anyone working to know that you have to take that time. As a patient on the other side now, I talk about this one, we've done these talks in front of a group of medical people, is for them to make sure that they're mentally healthy. Because they can't help me if they're not in that frame of mind. And unfortunately, it's a very busy field they're on. This is it's an old medical card I have. It's something I can show. I can't communicate all this information. So it's an easy way if you have a parent or someone that, say they have dementia, they can't speak, it's in their wallet, and somebody can say, okay, here's all their medical info. We always talk about it taking 2 to communicate. I've put in 4 years of work to be able to get to where I be. So it's really important that the other end of people that I'm talking to, no matter if it's the phone company or healthcare, that they take the time. So I also have the positives of the injury. This presentation talks a lot about negatives. We wanted to make sure that you know some of the positives, but I had a lot of medical issues before, so I did deal with the healthcare field a lot. I've learned life is short. You know, I went to work one day not knowing it would change my life and I would never work again. So I think that's something that I've learned from this injury, is that you need to take every moment you have. I was great at nonverbals before, and now I'm even better at nonverbals. Something when we do this presentation with people in the medical field, I don't think they understand or watch that. From my end, if I spend all day at medical appointments, those people are paid to spend time with me. So there's that human side of, you know, when you're working with people, you know, to make sure that you put in your best, because that's what I got. Thankfully, I think I've kept a lot of my humor from before. And, you know, I've spent many days, and I guess it probably worked out to months in a hospital since my fall. And some funny things I think I've come across in hospital is toast expiring. Like, I never knew toast expired. You get toast, everybody talks about hospital food, but I would get this toast in the morning and it has an expiry date, and it was 7 days later. And I would always joke and kind of laugh to myself, because my toast expires when it's cold and I can't put butter on it. I get new toast, but their toast expires in 7 days. So as well with I guess I find funny and emerge the soundproof curtains. So somebody will come in to talk to you, and they'll start to ask you what your problem is, and then they say, oh, hold on, I'm sorry, and they apologize, they close the curtain, but everybody's listening. If you've ever been in the AWIC, everybody's listening to everyone. Kind of crazy. Something I've heard a lot and got feedback in these talks we do is pipe, and I didn't know what this was before, but soft skills and compassion was, you know, just the way that you deal with person if they have a broken leg or they can't speak, right? Like, how's those skills? And I hope that people can take it to their day-to-day if it's somebody on the street. You know, how do you deal with that person walking by, you know, instead of just kind of running into them? So Alex and I really thought a long time about what can professionals do to avoid these situations, and we came up with a really quick, I think easy thing. Just pictures. So we kind of put together this stop, think, and go and engage. And so stop, we said, you know, if you're having problems communicating with someone, stop. Realize there's a problem. Do they have aphasia? Do they have dementia? Did they have a stroke? Is English their second language? Do they have a hearing impairment? Is their mouth wired shut? It can be anything. Don't panic, don't be scared. That's that silence thing. So stop and then think about it. I need to recognize this. Does that person really understand what I'm saying to them? And do I understand what they say to my, and then to go, like engage, try it out, remember the strategies we talked about. If it's as much as getting a pen and paper, if it's charades, you know, nobody likes to do chicken dance in safe way, but if that's what it does, it works, that's what's important. And then to remember silence is deafening for anyone with language problems. And never lose the compassion if you're working in the healthcare field, or again, it's someone you're socializing with, it's family, it's friends, it's somebody on the street. So we kind of go to questions generally at this point. I'm not too sure if Paige has any.
Sure. So the first question we have is about what it was like going from working with an SLP before your accident, when you would work alongside them, to now having one yourself. What was that transition like?
It was a very interesting transition, because I spent 16 years in a classroom daily with SLPs, OTs, PTs, nursing, everything. And I was part of that time. And so I went from people just or SLPs coming in and me doing the stuff that they put in place to all of a sudden working in a different way with an SLP and kind of really getting to the nitty-gritty of kind of what they do. So it was a interesting transition. I've learned a lot from my SLP, probably too much, but I think that SLPs are very, what's the word, when they're not recognized. For myself, losing my language and having someone help get your voice back is a very powerful thing. So I think that it was a big transition, and it was a great transition.
Awesome. Our next question is around your resiliency, and just can you speak a little bit to that? Have you always been this resilient, and how do you keep your spirits up?
I've always been a really resilient person. Like I said before, I've had a lot of medical issues outside of this one, obviously this one being a big one. And the workplaces I worked with or in, I had to be resilient, working with sick kids or working as an EMT. And probably the best way for anyone to be resilient is true humor, I find. If you can laugh a few times a day, I think it helps with your health in general.
I have a question for you. I know that our viewers at home can't see him, but you have a sweet little hearing dog
Nice.
kneeling beside you now. Can you tell us a little bit about your hearing dog?
Shay is just over a year, and she's just in training. She's kind of my best friend at the same time. It's interesting because losing my hearing, I have found a lot of things we take for granted that I've lost, and one of them might be the doorbell. It might be the microwave bell. Sometimes my phone ringing. And so having the ability to be able to cue me to those things without having an outside support person or family member or somebody having to call me. So she's really great that way. Interesting with her also is she's been able to detect sugar lows for me. I am diabetic. So she's going to be doing a lot of things. Also with having a service dog or a dog in general, I think people look to the dog, and that is a really great thing because sometimes I don't want people looking right at me, and that's the anxiety part. So, and she also settles me down anxiety-wise. So she's a little star, that's for sure. And quiet, thankfully, true with this thing.
You mentioned earlier in your presentation that the silence can be deafening, but you seem to be quite talkative. You said that you've gotten your speech speed back up. Can you speak a little bit to what it was like in the earlier days when you did have a lower speed of speech, and how you bridged that gap?
Okay. The silence, I think I shut down a lot in the beginning. Like I spoke a lot, so a lot of friends made a lot of jokes that finally I'll slow down after my fall. And for me, I was so used to having an instant conversation with someone and understanding everything they were saying or in a group setting, that all of a sudden I would say something back and I would get that silence back. And every time that happens, it reminds you of what you're going through and that you had a fall and your language isn't perfect. And so I've always said that silence is deafening, and I think when I meet new people, that's my greatest fear, is what are they gonna judge me? Are they gonna think I'm challenged? Where do they think I'm from? All these different things. I get nonstop, where are you from? And I'll say I'm from here, and they're like, no, where are you from? And so that silence it's a hard thing to get back. And I think if you ever tried it with someone in life and they come up and ask you a question and you just said nothing back, it's really awkward. Really awkward. So.
And our last question today is just from someone who may have just recently been diagnosed with aphasia. Do you have any online resources or suggestions for them to reach out to get further support?
Well, I'm not in particular, but definitely could email. There's a lot of resources online. If you search aphasia, I do have a very rare aphasia. I'm not your typical person with aphasia. A lot of people with aphasia, or I don't know if it'd be called normal aphasia, typical, you'll see that they can only say maybe a few words. But there's a lot of information online. Also, again, healthcare should be your best, you know, if you have questions or a family member going through that, or they could email me. Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for taking the time to listen. Thanks.
Okay, thanks again for joining us today. As was mentioned in the opening, today's webcast is part of Government of Alberta's Community and Social Services Learning Series, which will be running the third week of each month through June 2017. The series covers topics from ABII, like the one you saw today, but there are other series that will talk about Employment First, Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Initiative, FASD, and the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee, OPGT. Stay tuned for information on the next month's webcasts. To get updates and registration information about the sessions, please email us at abii@government.ab.ca and ask to be added to the mailing list. You can also find past and future webcasts there and sign up at csslearningseries.ca. Today's webcast was recorded and the video will be posted online, along with videos from all the previous webcasts. The video link will be sent out to all registrants in the near future. We encourage you to share this video with anyone you think may be interested. If you have feedback about today's webcast, please email us at abii@gov.ab.ca and let us know. You will also be receiving a feedback email from us. Please take the time to let us know what you thought of today's webcast. We'd love to hear your ideas. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we hope to see you next month.